and I'm really pleased to be able to introduce pt Rangaswami, who I've heard talk in various places at various times about various things, and always very interestingly. A few words about JP. He is a chief scientist for BT, and I'm reading a bit from his bio here. He has extensive international experience in IT and financial services, and he's also a fervent blogger. His blog's called confusedofcalcutta.com, always very entertaining. He's also a very active Twitterer. Jobsworth is his Twitter name. And he was born in Calcutta, as you might guess from the blog title, and lived nearly half of his life there before he came to the UK in 1980. He's very interested in lots of things, but I picked out particularly he's chairman of the School of Everything, which if you haven't come across, you should go and have a look for that on the web. School of Everything is a brilliant idea. Started how many? A couple of years ago? Not very long ago. Yeah. I won't explain it, find out for yourselves. And I noticed he's also chairman of Ribbit, so that when I phoned you, I got an interesting system that recorded my voice and then translated it into text. Yeah. That's what Ribbit does. Yeah.
Amongst other things.
Right. I tried to sign up, but doesn't have any invitations at the moment.
You get some from the end of January.
Right. So that's also something very interesting that converts voice messages into text. And he says he's very passionate about education, which is something that inspires a lot of us here today. So I've briefed JP on who we all are and why we're here, and he's going to speak to that for about 20 minutes or so, and then he's going to open up the conversation. And so we'll go through until 1:45. So welcome. Thank you very much for coming, JP.
Thank you, sir.
I'm looking forward to it.
Good morning, everyone. I feel slightly, I'm scamming you guys by saying I'm chief scientist of BT, because what would be truer to say is they put a white coat on me before the men in white coats could get me. Speaking to Sue, and I'm really excited about the diversity of this environment, because recently I was with Tim Berners-Lee, who's the inventor of the web, for want of a better phrase, and he was recognizing that while the internet was a single discipline, the web is really multidisciplinary. You need people who understand society, anthropology, civic rights, politics. It's much deeper than just a narrow technical discipline. Whereas you could say the internet was about connectivity and about hauling bits and being able to present data. The web is really about us. So the more sort of multifaceted and interdisciplinary group you can get, the more valuable the web is going to become in any form of digital communication. So when I saw the kind of people that were coming together for Amplified Leicester, I was keen in taking part. And my interest in education, because I've always told myself when I retire, which I hope is 5 or 6 years away, I will set a school up from scratch, and I have a lot of ideas as to what that school is going to look like. And so again, interacting with people of different ages, different backgrounds helps me understand that. I want to give you 3 ideas about how I view information, and then talk about part solutions. So there'll be 4 5-minute sections. I may go a little over the 20 minutes, and then I want to open that up for just dialogue and debate as needed. If you feel you desperately want to stop me in the middle of what I'm saying, try. It may not be easy. Right? When I was at school, my précis were 3 times as long as the original, so I'm not known for being dramatically brief. But you're welcome to try and interrupt. But give me 20 minutes and I'll get through. But the first thing to consider about information, where I come from, is that we're in an incredible journey over the last 40 years as to how the power of dealing with information is changing because of the tools. One way of looking at what's happening is that in the 60s, with the invention of the desktop, the mouse, the pointer, the ability to manipulate information on a screen began. Okay? Human beings, for the first time in their lives, had an opportunity in a publishing type world to manipulate the information that they were given. but they could only do that with structured information to begin with. So it's been that long, 40 years, since we've had the concept of what, probably Microsoft was the first to make commercial, but that were tried out in labs in Xerox PARC and then came out of those labs into Apple and then Microsoft, and we now think of it as normal. But it's only 40 years ago that we had that ability to manipulate structured information. It then it took us to the 1980s, where rather than just consuming structured information, we were given the opportunity to produce it. So word processors and spreadsheets and the precursors to PowerPoint, so words like VisiCalc and WordStar and Storyboard came out, and suddenly individuals had the right to produce structured information. And those that were growing up then or had access to those tools then were a lucky generation, because we could start doing things that previous generations just had no choice to. Then we moved into the 90s, and instead of just consuming and producing structured information, what the web did was to say, if you had a browser, if you had a connection to the web, and you had the kind of information that was on the web, we started being able to sort of consume unstructured information. The whole concept of the search engine was different from the stuff we had in the past, because you could put in information that was incomplete and still get a return. Until then, all search that we carried out, you had to know the answer to find it. Okay? So when you were using a system, however, these early systems in the 1980s, if you didn't know the product code you were looking for, you couldn't get the answer. If you didn't know the library's sort of ISBN, you couldn't get the answer, because wildcards or incomplete, I think the name begins with, was not good enough. So that was a huge shift, because suddenly you could start consuming unstructured information. And from the late 1990s through to now, we're in the most powerful age of all, where we have the tools to produce unstructured information. So, the blogs, the wikis, the microblogs, or Twitter, or whatever, now we actually have the capacity to publish. To a computer, there is no difference between one of you putting a comment on a blog and uploading a video on YouTube. Because fundamentally, you could say a comment on a blog is uploading text. Okay? So if you ever made a comment on anything you've ever seen on the web, you've actually carried out the same thing as you would carry out if you were uploading a video onto YouTube. Right? People may make it look more complicated, right? But it is just bits being loaded somewhere that isn't at your server set. So that's the sort of first explanation of what's happening to do with information. The second explanation is going to be a little weirder. It's to do with how things are, how image is working, how voice is working, how text is working. Right. 30 years ago, if you looked at image, the concept of image was that you had to go to, by image I mean photographs. Okay? You had to go somewhere, you had to give a firm in, they'd develop it, then you'd come back, look at the developed stuff, choose the things that worked, because not all of them would have worked, and said, I'd like 3 copies of number 3 of this one, and I like this one blown up, or something like that. And amazingly, over a 30-year period, what has actually happened